Earlier this week, we talked with UNL Extension forage specialist Bruce Anderson about options producers have to use corn and soybean as forage. We first asked what producers should keep in mind if they decide to turn cows out into a less than productive cornfield.
Well, I think there's two things we're probably watching most carefully with grazing the corn. One, of course, is to reduce the waste a little bit because the cows can certainly trample a lot of that corn. So one of the things we're advocating with folks is that they just allocate 3-4 days at a time worth of corn to the animals using a cross electric fence, maybe driving down some corn to make it easy to put up the fence. And then after they've grazed for a few days, move a new fence down so that they can get another small supply. That way they don't have free reign of the whole field and run over most of the corn rather than graze it. The other thing is being a little cautious yet about nitrates. Typically we aren't going to worry too much about nitrates in cornfields, but in places where, for instance, maybe the corn only got 3 feet tall and the cows are going to graze it all the way to the ground, those could be some pretty hot areas that we may want to fence out if we're going to be grazing, just in case those are real hot spots. Or we find other places where manure and fertilizer both were used and the whole plant might have some higher nitrates. We've got to have some cautious that way also.
Let's look at soybeans. There are producers that are looking at using soybeans as forage because they don't think they'll get enough yield to harvest them. How tight is that window getting before producers need to make that decision, and what's the yield difference that you can look at?
Okay, well, I think the decision time frame really has to be when the beans start turning yellow at the bottom and leaves are getting ready to drop. If we drop very many leaves, we're going to lose a lot of our yield and much of the quality forage that might be available out there. So that's kind of the time frame, and each field is going to be kind of different in terms of when that's going to occur. If we're trying to decide, the hay out there is probably going to yield somewhere in most fields 1.5 tons worth of hay. Its value is anybody's guess, but that's what we balance with the number of bushels of beans we might get off of there and see which might be the best return for us.
So is there a level that you go to if the beans are going to yield, if I think they're going to yield X number of bushels per acre, then I leave them go? Or if they're going to be below that level, do I harvest them for forage?
Well, I would certainly say that at about the 10 bushel level, we're probably at a point where harvesting the beans with the price of those beans right now is a fairly attractive point. But if it's below 10, we may get more value out of harvesting it as a hay crop rather than as beans.
Label restrictions when you're talking about using these to feed if you've applied any kind of herbicide, pesticide, anything like that.
Very important to take a look at the labels. Insecticides, some of them absolutely prohibit the use of that as a feedstuff. Many herbicides, other than things like glyphosate, may not have any wording at all about it and may not have been approved for it also. So we have to take a look at our labels on what we used.
Farmers are going to get the crops out of the field quite early this year. If they're going to plant forage back in, is it too dry or does that not matter?
Well, I think the dryness is real important criteria there because the soil got kind of super dry here this summer. And so we've been recommending to folks that they actually wait to plant until we've had about 2 inches of rain within a 1 week's time period just to get the crop established. And then after that we need more rain to grow a significant amount of feed out there.
If it would happen to rain, that's a big if right now. If it would happen to rain and pastures maybe get a little help from that, they turn green, is it okay to turn cows out there or do you not do that?
Well, it's sure tempting to put them out there on some of that green feed, but it may be one of the worst things we could do out in those pastures because they've been stressed so much already. Then they start to green up and pull out of their root reserves to try and do some more greening. And if we put added stress onto them with additional grazing there, that's going to make them even weaker going into the winter. So I think we're at the point now where any pastures that are done really are done and we shouldn't be grazing them anymore no matter what kind of moisture we get for this year. Just save all of that growth and any of that recovery for next year's use.
I'm going to ask you to speculate a little bit here. We knew forage supplies were going to be tight this year with the drought in Texas last year. Now we have Texas drought followed by a drought across the Midwest. How tight are forages going to be next year?
They're getting really tight. We're not going to have much carryover next year, that's for sure. I think there's a lot of fingers being crossed that we have enough supply just for this winter because so many of the stored forages are already starting to be used. It's not just a winter supply, it's going to be a late summer and fall use situation for many people.